So, hi Christine, welcome to our RS Aqua podcast called OrcaPod. Obviously, with our technical hitches so far, you'll know that this is our first virtual podcast episode yet. So, yeah. Shall we jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Christine, if you don't mind introducing yourself and just let us know a little bit about the work that you do as well.
Hi, well, I'm Christine Edwards. I'm a professor of applied microbiology at Robert Gordon University. So over the last 15 years, I've been at RGU, Robert Gordon University, where I've been generally working on toxic algae, cyanobacteria, blue-green algae. You may have come across these in ponds. And I've also branched out into the marine algae that cause blooms known as red tides in a recent project called Safe and Sustainable Shellfish. And I'll come back onto that later. I did my PhD at UCL on peanuts and their diseases, so it's quite a change from that. But the technology underlying it is all very similar. And I also spent 10 years in industry working on various aspects of chromatography equipment from R&D to production scale. So that's kind of, and a lot of the work I do is producing high value bioactive compounds, mainly toxic ones for an industrial supplier. And also we use these large volumes of toxins for our research because we can afford to do experiments that would cost about 100 grand. If we had to buy the stuff commercially, we can do things that other people can't do. So it's all things algae really is what it's all about. So looking at new methods to detect the toxins and looking at ways to get rid of them. So particularly important in aquaculture and the shellfish industry is the need to do something about the shutdown periods. So when they get levels of toxins in the shellfish above regulatory levels, then they have to shut down. It costs lots of money. Sometimes there are recalls. I'm working closely with West Country mussels down in Cornwall. It can be £30,000 a week. So, it's quite significant, and it might be several weeks closure. And so, although there is a robust testing program in place that's, defined by EU regulation, the shellfish growers actually want the ability to check the shellfish themselves so they can make decisions on whether to harvest or not, rather than have the shellfish shipped off to get tested in Weymouth and wait for the results to come back. And and biological situations and the seal can change quite quickly, the conditions, so they can make a decision. So that's really one of the projects. Safe and Sustainable Shellfish is really looking at enabling the shellfish growers to test on site in a better way than the tests are currently available. And we're also looking at measures to actually destroy toxins and algae in the vicinity of the shellfish beds as well, which is quite an engineering challenge, but we're starting small. So that's a kind of rough backgroundy bit there.
It sounds like you're involved in a great many different projects inside of the industry. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, our main interest is freshwater, but it's sort of gone along into the marine. And nowadays, with all the global climate events and stuff like that, what you're finding is that there is this transition of water, contaminated water, toxins going from the freshwater to the marine environment. So an example of that is in California, where lots of sea otters died as a consequence of eating clams that had fed on algae that had come down the river and into the coastal zone. So you've got all these new kind of things going on.
Yeah, it's one way of thinking. You'd never think that something so far away could impact a creature in a completely different habitat and ecosystem so dramatically. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more of that likely to happen, and ship ballast moving around takes different species, different strains to different locations. So there are changing toxic beasties around the place, changing profiles. And often people are using particular methods to analyze for them that are targeted. So they're only looking for X, Y, and Z, not W, and W might be the problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking, because I did my undergraduate dissertation on ship ballasting and non-native invasive species, and I focused on a species of gastropod. I think I looked at lionfish and maybe some seaweed as well, and obviously those are macro species, but obviously at first glance you think that it's them that's causing a lot of issue, and arguably they are looking at lionfish, but they're not, as you quite rightly said, it may well be something like the algae that's really driving something and something driving the change, and it's not something you'd considered before. So that's a really interesting way of looking at it.
And the microbes there are actually, and people often overlook the microbes. The algae people see more because they can form visible blooms as well. So I mean, we're working with in that project we're working with Plymouth Marine Lab because of their satellite observations of blooms. But then some of the toxic ones are a bit lower down and not very dense, so the satellite can't see that either. So yes, it's all very exciting, and all these blooms are becoming more frequent.
It's something we've started working on here at RS Aqua as well. I'm sure, as you know, that we've sort of designed a harmful algal bloom buoy for real-time detections just offshore in Scotland. So we do get requirements for that more and more coming through, which is good that people are starting to monitor it, but it's obviously happening a bit more frequently as well, which is a shame. But
And I think also, a lot of the long-term exposure to small concentrations, in opposition to, a high dose quickly that kills, there are a lot of other toxic effects, long-term toxic effects that are being discovered as there is more research. But the research is expensive because the toxins are expensive. So we make quite a lot of money out of these things.
it happens. And I just want to go back. So I'm sure you said a minute ago your research was looking at peanuts and disease of peanuts. How did you get into this industry following that?
Because a lot of that involved analytical technology and purification of compounds to look at the chemical interactions, the biochemical interactions between the plant pathogen and the peanut. And so then I did a postdoc on toxic algae and water quality in Dundee, and that's kind of where it came from.
Oh, okay.
It's just incredible. It's a completely different pathway to what I expected you to say that came from, yeah.
And on the back of that, I'm interested, was water quality something you were interested in growing up? So did you spend any time, at the beach, and has it have a physical interaction with the environment, or is it just something, like you said, you picked up following the postdoc?
I think I've always been interested in bioactive natural products. So whether they're actually toxic and very bad for you, or whether they're potential therapeutics, because I do some of that as well. I think it's the natural product thread that really, and how they fit in. So it's not particularly the water quality along the way, but then it just follows anyway. And because applied, the work is then more applied. It's like I'm just working on a proposal for extra funding in Sri Lanka, where we have a big project that's just about to end, and that's natural drinking water treatment solutions. So instead of using all the chemicals and stuff we normally use, and the big filters and high energy demanding solutions, we have a nature-based solution using microbes to get rid of the toxins and pollutants. So nature does a lot of good stuff.
It certainly does.
It's allowed to.
That reminds me, I don't know if this is still a theory that's around, but we talked about the Gaia theory at college, and I always sort of think about that and how, unless we don't disturb it too much, the climate can regulate itself. It's a really interesting theory, and I guess it sort of comes back to that.
Yeah, for sure. Because Gaia is the is that the Greek name for Mother Earth, isn't it?
I don't know.
The name just rings a bell because I read the Stephen Fry books on Greek mythology, and Gaia was the one of the gods or something that was supposed to be representative of Mother Earth. So that's interesting.
Maybe that's where it comes from. I didn't know that. So I guess you've mentioned a bit on the sort of impacts of what you're researching, and obviously freshwater toxins moving into the marine environment. What do you think is sort of the biggest, most pivotal impact of this, and what you've been researching? Or
I think delivering solutions, industrial solutions, applied solutions, so the drinking water treatment in Sri Lanka can make a difference because they don't have tapped water. These rural communities are still using wells. So having safe water free from toxins, I mean, they could cover the well up, but they don't, and they do have toxins in them, can make a difference. With the shellfish project, having the field tests that the growers want will make a difference to them and public health as well, protect public health. And also with our the work we do producing the chemicals for the research environment, for environmental monitoring, it does mean we are supplying the world's largest portfolio of bioactive compounds from algae. So maybe so these are the things, and there's lots of other things going on that I do forget as well. It's the age thing.
There's so much going on as well. It's hard to keep track of everything.
So such a vast field of research. I'm impressed that you managed to list off everything at the beginning. I mean, certainly when somebody, example, on the off chance that somebody asks what I do, I often say a short sentence and realise actually I'm leaving off so many different things. So I was very impressed at the amount of different, not only what you were involved with, but the fact that you could recall them so freely. So that's brilliant. You mentioned obviously Sri Lanka and that the drinking well and the measurement of toxins involved with there. Has there ever been anywhere interesting or exotic that you've been able to visit with your research or your involvement with the industry? Is there anywhere of note that you've enjoyed visiting? Or
Sri Lanka.
I can imagine it was a...
Ironically, in this project that's just about to end, it's one of the Global Grand Challenge Research Fund ones. So our budget was cut by the government. It's part of the ODA reductions. And ironically, because of the pandemic and the bombs in 2019 in Sri Lanka, I've not been in that duration, but have been on several occasions before where I've got sort of smaller funding to run workshops, to do some knowledge transfer and capacity building stuff.
Oh, wow.
That's really interesting. Imagine it must have been quite a culture difference going over to there compared to...
I felt very comfortable and good there. I think India was probably more challenging.
Yeah.
The difference, although there's poverty in Sri Lanka, it's not quite as depressing, if you like.
Okay.
The people aren't as depressed as and quite begging. You've not got quite extremes, and you haven't got the what I find in India. You have got this caste system, which is quite. I think that's the challenge. That people treat their own people so badly.
Yeah, I worked abroad for a couple of years and knew a lot of people from Sri Lanka, and they were always saying go and visit because it's one of the most beautiful countries around, certainly in that part of the world. So unfortunately I didn't get the chance to, so it was one of my regrets, but I imagine it must have been wonderful going to visit.
Oh yeah, the food's good. Yeah, the food's excellent. I mean, we went to some sort of dodgy places too, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, we've done work in Brazil as well, and most places I've not been to China or Russia yet. I don't think I've got them on my target list.
So one of the other things we always quite like to touch on with guests that we have on our podcast is a piece of influential technology that you think has really changed how you do your research, or it just has helped you with your career. Is there anything that sticks out to you? Or
I do like my posh toys. my analytical instruments. So and I'm quite good at getting a good deal from manufacturers and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, having the latest kit for analysis and stuff. And there's still one I have to get, which actually shows you, it can actually show you within cells where molecules are located. So like I killed some water fleas with toxic algae, and they you could see where it was inside the water fleas with this. It's called mass spec imaging. So that's on my list of acquisitions when I get the funding.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Is that kind of, well, something you think of when you think of like future technology that you'll be able to do, and yet it's happening now? It's amazing.
Because that technology is used a lot in the biomedical field for disease biomarkers in tumours and all that sort of stuff, and brain things, but it's not used as much in environmental scenarios and looking at trophic transfer of pollutants and that kind of thing.
Okay, interesting.
It's just incredible.
It's
You wouldn't expect it, would you?
Not at all.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned that you've been involved in several projects, obviously spanning everything from peanuts to marine-based toxins. Has there been a career highlight for you over the years?
Of different things. I enjoyed being in industry, and I gave up half my salary and a company car and a good pension and a permanent job to go back in academia. So could be a midlife crisis that I was having or whatever. But I think when you get a bit older, you kind of realize if things aren't what you want anymore, then you have to do something radical. So I don't really have a career highlight. A few, I mean, it was good to get promoted to professor. It's good to get some really big funding, some big projects, but they come with their big challenges too. Like managing all the partners is, trying to get them to do what they promised. But we won't go any further there.
We can relate to that somewhat.
Absolutely. Some very apt words though about changing if you feel not enjoying or doing the same thing, then make a radical change. I think that's something that everyone can take away. Certainly.
It's a really brave thing to do as well, is to move away from, like you say, an industry job that had all these benefits to something that doesn't have that. But yeah.
Absolutely, incredibly admirable to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing was, the company I was with when it was small was probably a bit like Aqua is now. So you have a very diverse job. Even if you have a specific job, it's probably still quite diverse. But then the company I was with, it sort of got bigger and became more funding or money orientated rather than customer solution orientated, because I did quite a lot of work with GSK and other customers to maximize the technology for their benefit, and that was quite exciting. So, but actually just sorting out messes and moany customers wasn't really what I wanted to do anymore.
That's understandable. I think the point you made is really, really true, actually. Like with RS Aqua, although we have our set job roles, because it's such a small company, you end up doing marketing, and then 10 minutes later you can be doing some commercial side of things, and keeps you on your toes.
Certainly does.
Yeah.
Certainly does.
And you feel like your opinion is really valued, and you get a lot of say on what goes on, and it's great.
Yeah, it's a good thing about working for
I can see that, and that's, don't get too big is what I'd say.
Yeah, grow a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, Christine, I was doing a bit of background research on you, as I sort of tried to before the podcast, and found a recent publication of yours that intrigued me. And I guess it's sort of resources that were produced from the production of Scotch whisky. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, we had a project. It's called it was a PhD project funded by the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, because we have these innovation centres in Scotland, and the idea was we would grow algae on the whisky waste to make bioplastic. But as that was based on a bit of information on what was published about what was in the whiskey waste. So acetate was going to be in there, so that can be a carbon source. So yeah, fine. It didn't turn out to be like that, and we ended up. We were working with a local distillery, Glencadden Distillery here in Brecon, down the road here, and did some preliminary stuff, and then we worked with the Scottish Whisky Research Association to take a bigger sweep of what the waste is like, and actually it yielded quite a lot of useful stuff. And I do have this other interest in the circular economy, and we do have to focus efforts on resource reclamation, because we worry about climate change, but if we don't recycle phosphorus, we may as well not bother worrying about climate change, because once it's gone, and that's it. There is no alternative. So and all these things are linked, because if you've got too much phosphorus or nitrate in the environment, then you get the algae anyway. So there is a link there. So that's how that came about. And I'm also another one that's just on its way, is looking at anaerobic digestate feedstocks in Orkney, because they ship their waste off to Shetland. They have to pay for it. It's negative, it's got a bad carbon footprint, and it's not used. So we have to use our waste better, and ideally if it makes energy and some other products. So I'm kind of involved in a few of these other kind of projects, but there's always some algae lurking somewhere in there.
Mate, how do you? It just seems like there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Your research is so vast. It's amazing.
Yeah, one of the other projects I've just I finished last year actually, but I still do some collaboration with them, is a company called Scott Bio, and they make the blue colour that goes into Smarties.
Oh, wow.
And that comes from algae too. It's also quite a good therapeutic, and there's there's antivirals as well. We have an antiviral project with them too.
Oh, wow. Was it the blue Smarties that got taken out of Smartie?
They did that, yeah, till they got a natural colorant.
Yeah, I thought that rang a bell.
So that natural colouring is the bit where you've been doing that research with. That's where that comes from.
It's the same organism. I don't think they supplied the Smartie stuff. They supplied the same pigment for gin, one blue gin they provide. But our project was looking at, because they produce that, then as you scale up, you've got lots of leftover algae. What do you do with it? Is there something else valuable in there? So yeah, so it's always lots going on. The older you get, the more you seem to have to do.
That's amazing. So it's quite clear to see you've accomplished an incredible amount in your career so far. But is there anything else that you hope to accomplish in the next 5 or 10 years or so, either with work and your career or just in general? Is there anything?
I would like to see the rollout of some of these projects into reality, because they're not quite where they should be for various reasons, and I'd like to make so the industry does that, so people actually see real solutions coming out of academia instead of this. And the other thing I've got a partially finished cookbook that needs to get finished at some point. So.
Ooh,
Interesting.
I'd have to get one of those.
I was going to say, I'd love to hear what's involved with that.
I've been neglecting it.
Do you use sort of local ingredients and stuff in that one, or is it?
Some of it's local ingredients. I mean, we are quite well placed here for fish and stuff, but the best mussels come from Cornwall that I've ever had. So they were actually on the Saturday, James Martin's Saturday Kitchen programme the other week. He had them. So that was St Austell Bay mussels, if you get the chance.
Austell,
yeah. Do love James Martin as well.
Yeah.
He supplies Rick Stein there, the guy there.
Sure, yeah. I think my parents have been to that restaurant in that area. Good beer from St Austell as well.
Very nice beer. Still. Just Cornwall do everything very well, don't they?
They do.
Well, should we move on to the slightly less formal, more fun questions?
I think so. So we always we'd like to ask these to our guests of the podcast. So we'll put them to you, Christine. So the first one is desert island questions. What would be 3 items that you would take with you if you were stranded on a desert island?
Yeah, a Swiss Army knife, a wind-up torch, and some matches. Really
Very
boring.
practical.
So practical.
Very practical.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's me.
And if you were stranded in the water somewhere, what would be one species that you would like to see and that you absolutely would not want to see?
Well, I'd go for the dolphin and the shark. I'd ride the dolphin home, and the shark I wouldn't want to see because that'd be its lunch. So you probably get quite a few similar answers to that one, I guess.
No, they've all been quite varied actually.
They have actually. I think someone said a land animal in the water before.
Did they?
I can't remember.
Or an elephant.
Yeah, it was an elephant. I think Martin.
Yeah.
I think it was Martin.
That'd be quite a
said
sad
elephant.
sight to see in the water, so I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Joke.
And then lastly, you touched on it during our technical setup before the podcast, but is there a certain item of technology or items of technology you wish hadn't been invented?
Oh, the microphone that we sent you.
Yeah, no, I think the smartphone, whilst they are very useful, I think it does everybody's going
Walking into lampposts.
People, I do teach undergraduates as well, and postgraduates, and they're not listening, they're just like, so I think elements of the smartphone thing, when phones first came out when I was working in industry, it just had a little one with the buttons, phone, ring.
That's all you need. As long as you can phone who you need to phone, that's fine. I agree.
Absolutely. I had wonderful days with my old Nokia. It was brilliant.
And it had Snake. Snake was the best bit of having a Nokia. But...
I think nowadays people are just so obsessed. Yeah. And with, it's not so much just a phone, it's all the Facebook, Instagram, blah-de-blah.
It's almost like people care more about their virtual online presence than their actual physical presence nowadays, which is quite a sad thing. But I actually think there's quite a bit of a movement away from that, especially in different generations, I think.
Yeah, it's. I think recently there's been a trigger of reducing screen time. I've seen a lot of different sports have been involved in. I can't remember the acronym, but it's basically cutting their screen time and trying to get people more involved in taking part in group activities and whatnot, rather than spending hours scrolling. And the mental health benefits from them has been profound.
Getting kids back outside climbing trees and playing hide and seek.
That's it.
I have a dog down here that does that, takes care of me.
Gets you out walking.
Well, he doesn't walk, he just runs.
Bless him. I think that's come to the end of our podcast episode.
I think so. Christine, thank you so much for letting us pry your wealth of knowledge and experience in your field. It's been amazing to learn quite how in depth this industry is.
Certainly things that you've mentioned today that I wouldn't even know possible, which
Likewise.
has been really great. So thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christine.
Okay. Thank
Perfect.
you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.